Right, now on to video number 4, functions and procedures. Now functions and procedures are used a lot in scripts. You will not find a single script which does not use a function or procedure, because a function or procedure is basically a set list of commands for the script to run. Usually it is a set list of commands for the script to run other functions and procedures. So, in order to define it, you would put to define a procedure, type in procedure, and then the procedure name. Now this must not contain any spaces at all. So we'll put simple procedure, and then a semicolon, and the next line we can put begin, and then put end. And notice a semicolon on the end. Now if you want to declare a variable, this is for just this one procedure, it will be called a local variable. If you put them up here, outside of the procedure, it will be called a global variable. Now global variables are available to the whole of the script. They're available to every procedure, they're available to, well, if you have multiple procedures, they're available to every procedure. But if you define them inside the procedure, then they're only available to that single procedure. So let's just define an integer and define another one here. Right, so quite simply, a integer is only available to simple procedure because it has been defined within simple procedure. So we can use a integer inside simple procedure. We can also use a integer 1 inside simple procedure because it's a global variable. However, as a integer is a global variable, a integer 1 is a global variable, we can set it to something else if we wanted to. But we cannot change a integer because it is a local variable. So this would throw up an error because a integer is a local variable and is only available to simple procedure. Now simple procedures are quite simply a way of having a list of commands, so sort of like opening the bank, and then withdrawing something, no, depositing everything, and then withdrawing something, and then closing the bank. And then you could simply call that do bank stuff, and it would be every single time you wanted it to open the bank, deposit, withdraw, and then close it again. Every time you want to do that, all you would have to do is call do bank stuff, and then every single time you put that, it will automatically run everything between the begin and end of do bank stuff. Now you can, if you want to, you can also press that, and that's an easy way of seeing what is actually part of do bank stuff. Because if you're not too sure if this is part of do bank stuff, then just press the minus button, and if it disappears, then you know that it's in part of do bank stuff. If it's not, if it doesn't disappear and it's still there, like this is, then you'll know that it's something completely different. So next thing are functions, and there is really only one difference between a function and procedure. And the difference between them is that a function will return a variable, whereas a procedure will not. So if you want to do it, so let's put a function, and then you put, instead of putting a semicolon, you put a colon, and then the data type that it will return. So make it return an integer, and then a semicolon, and then you just continue it like normal, as if it was just a normal procedure. Now what you can do, in order for it to return a variable, you type in result colon equals, and then what you want it to return. So let's put 1, 2, 3. Now there is one more thing which I will tell you about, and that is called writeln. Writeln. And what that does is it will print a line out to the console down here, to the debug box. So everything that's inside in a string will be put down. So we'll put hello world. This is something I should have told you earlier, but I forgot to. Now if you click on run, we haven't, everything between this begin and this end will only be run. This function won't be run, this procedure won't be run, unless we call it down here between this begin and this end. Now as you can see, the only thing that's between that begin and end is the writeln. So press play, as you can see, whoops, let's just there you go, and you've got hello world. Now also while it's doing it, will tell you hints, so it tells me that the variables aren't actually even being used, so there's no point in them being there. Now you can put them there, and you might use them later on, in which case you can completely ignore it. And then it will tell you whether it's compiled or not, and it will print it out, which is what we've done here. Now you can also print out integers, such as like that. Now, or you could even do a function. Now, showing you the variables from last time, if you want to, you can also set variables to the results of functions. So, a integer 1 colon equals a function. Now this is possible because it is a function which returns an integer. And because it returns an integer, you can then set it to a variable. And then you can quite simply print it out using the writeln. As you can see, 1, 2, 3. And what this is doing is it's declared the integer, and then it's setting the integer to the value of a function. And a function sets the result to 1, 2, 3. And then down here we've got a writeln, and we're printing out the result of a integer 1, which as we set up here is now 1, 2, 3. So it prints out 1, 2, 3 to the console, and then it finishes the script. Now the next thing is parameters. Sometimes you want to tell it to do other stuff. So you could have one function or one procedure to do multiple things. So you could have, so if it was to, for example, walking, you might want one procedure or one function to walk there and back again. But it doesn't know where it is, so you can use parameters. And to do that, simply after the function name, put an open bracket, and then a name for the parameter. So go to bank, and that can be a boolean. And then we'll close the bracket. And what this has done is it's now created a variable called goToBank, which is now a boolean, which we can now use inside of a function. Let's rename that to walk. So there you go, now the function will be referred to as walk. And we'll set that to a boolean. Now when you call walk, you also need to include a boolean into it as well. So this will now no longer work because a integer 1 expects an integer, but we've changed the result to a boolean. So this will now no longer work. So we need to get rid of that. And as you see, we've got a function, but it requires a boolean. So you can put an open bracket. Actually, we renamed it, didn't we? Walk. And you can do an open bracket, once again, like last time, it'll bring up the code syntax, and gives you a hint of what to type. So as you can see, we now need a boolean. So if you're walking towards the bank, you can put true, and then you can close it, and then that will make this happy. However, obviously, if you're walking from the bank to maybe the coal mine, you can put false. And then you can have checks in here, such as if checks and while checks, and basically logical checks in order to check whether something is true or false, and then you can do certain things depending on what the input was. Things like the if checks and while checks and all of that, and logic checks, I will explain all of that in a later tutorial. But hopefully this will have been enough to get you started on understanding functions and procedures. And you will hopefully be here for my next tutorial.